Hannah's POV. "It's nice to meet you, Henry," I said, smiling up at the man before me. I had to admit that he was handsome, but obviously he wasn't as handsome as Sebastian. Nobody compared to Sebastian when it came to looks. "Please, call me Hannah," I added. "Hannah," he repeated my name in a breath. My name felt weird coming out of his lips. Not a bad weird, but different. It was like hearing it for the first time. There's something about him I can't seem to figure out. Nora said into my mind. Her voice was filled with wonder and curiosity. "I'm sorry," Henry said, snapping himself back to reality. "I just never thought I'd come face to face with the Luna Queen herself. You're far more beautiful than I could ever imagine." My eyes widened and I could feel a blush creeping across my cheeks and around my nose. I never considered myself to be beautiful. I wasn't sure what to say in response. "Don't forget about the kitten," Nora reminded me. "Oh, right, the kitten!" I echoed Nora's words out loud. Henry looked taken aback by my sudden outburst and change of subject. He rose his eyebrows and cocked his head to the side curiously. "There's a kitten stuck in that oak tree," I said, pointing to the tree in the distance behind him. He turned and looked at it, a frown forming on his lips. "Are you sure?" he asked, turning back to me. "How do you know?" "Because I heard it," I told him. "I tried to get it out, but it was too far in there and I couldn't reach it. So I went to get Sebastian, but—" My words trailed off. He stared around my saddened face for a moment before nodding once. He turned in the direction of the tree, and to my surprise, he started running toward it. "He's going to help the kitten," Nora said excitedly. It did seem that way. I followed closely behind him until we reached the tree. My heart was heavy in my chest because the cat was no longer meowing. I had to stifle a sob as the silence grew thick around us. "It was meowing a lot before I left," I told him in a whisper. He too looked concerned as I showed him the hole the cat crawled inside. He poked his head in for a moment and then came back covered in dirt. "It's too dark," he told me. "The flashlight, I must have left it on the ground when I fell." "Hold on," I told him as I ran back in the direction we came from. I found the flashlight right where I left it, and I brought it back to him quickly. He turned the flashlight on and went back into the tree. He was silent for a short moment. I nearly heard his heart beating rapidly in his chest. He sucked in a sharp breath as he went further into the tree. The opening of the tree wasn't nearly big enough to fit his entire body inside. He was too wide and broadly built. I heard parts of the tree cracking as he made his way inside. "Did you find it?" I asked. I was afraid to know the answer. He didn't respond at first, but soon he came out of the tree holding a small white kitten in the palms of his hands. I gasped as I got a glimpse of the kitten. She was so tiny and she was covered in dirt. The dirt in her pure white fur made her look almost black and damp. She had some blood in her stomach region, which sank my heart into the pit of my stomach. Her eyes were closed, but she was still breathing quite heavily. "Oh my goddess," I breathed as I ran over to him. "Is she going to be okay?" "It's hard to tell," he said, examining the kitten carefully. "Do you know anything about healing animals?" "I'm a doctor," I told him. "I know about healing people, not much about animals, but I can give it a try if we have the proper equipment." "Doesn't the palace have an infirmary?" he asked, glancing over at me. I nodded quickly. "Yes, let's get her there," I agreed. With that being said, he cradled the kitten in his arms and followed me into the palace. Sebastian's POV. He watched as Hannah ran back into the garden. He told her he couldn't help her get the kitten from the tree because he was way too busy with his work. She looked all sorts of hurt and it tugged painfully at his heart. He hated hurting and disappointing her. He could tell something had been bothering her for a while. She's been a bit distant lately, but he couldn't figure out what it was. He figured it probably had to do with everything going on, a lot of stress and anxieties. Giving her space was the best thing he could do for her. Plus, he really did have a lot of work he needed to do. He couldn't be bothered with a small cat. It would only set his work back. He was used to having small animals in his yard, and not all of them survived. They easily got trapped in small areas. Hannah would just have to get used to it. But he knew from the looks on her face that she wasn't going to get used to it. Part of what he loved about her was that she had a huge heart, and she cared about things, like small animals. He couldn't help but watch her from his window as she ran back into the garden and toward the large oak tree. Then he saw someone he didn't recognize. It was a man. He looked like a gardener, but Sebastian didn't remember hiring a new gardener. Perhaps he was someone Magnolia had hired before she was locked in the dungeon. Even still, it bothered him that he was walking close to Hannah. She didn't know he was there, and it almost seemed like he was waiting for her. He was staying still, listening to her footsteps. As she rounded the corner of the rose garden, she ran directly into him. He didn't look at all startled, and she looked mortified. Sebastian felt a fury going through him. He took in a deep breath to calm himself down, but it wasn't working. He didn't like this man getting close enough to Hannah to where he knocked her to the ground. Sebastian felt tense, hoping that she wasn't injured. If she had any ounce of blood escape from her body, he was going to rip that man's head right off his shoulders. "They are talking," Eric said in a low growl. He was anything but happy. He was right, though. Hannah was now standing to her feet, and they seemed to be talking. He was staring at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Hannah was gorgeous. But Sebastian didn't want other men thinking so too. He clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth. They went to the tree together. She must have told him about the kitten. Sebastian watched as the gardener went into the tree. Hannah went back to grab the flashlight she dropped on the ground, and once she brought it back to him, he was able to get the kitten. It was small. Sebastian could barely see it from where he was standing. Hannah looked worried as she examined the cat briefly. They were saying something he couldn't hear, and then he watched as Hannah turned toward the palace and started running toward it. "He's following her!" Eric roared with fury. "Oh, fuck no," Sebastian said in a low and threatening tone. The gardener was going into the palace with her, Hannah's POV. The infirmary was on the other end of the palace. Henry followed me with the kitten in his arms until we reached the infirmary. Dr. Conway sat at his desk and looked startled when we entered. He stood to his feet quickly and gave me a quick bow. Worry was evident in his expression. "Is everything okay, Your Majesty?" he asked, rushing toward me. "Are you injured?" "No," I answered breathlessly. I looked over at the kitten in Henry's arms. "We found an injured kitten, and I want to see if I can help it. Do you mind if I use some supplies?" "I don't mind at all," Dr. Conway said, his brows furrowing together as he stared at the cat. I could tell this was new territory for him, and he wasn't used to helping injured animals. I ignored his questioning looks and went over to a bed, motioning for Henry to put the kitten down. He did so, and I wrapped the kitten in a small blanket. She was shaking rapidly, and I only figured it was because she was cold. I grabbed a bucket of water from the sink and a washcloth. When I returned to the kitten, I started gradually cleaning her. She stopped shaking as the water soaked her fur and warmed her body. The darkness of her fur started fading, leaving her snow-white and gorgeous. I rolled the kitten onto her back so I could get a better look at the wound on her stomach. Once I finished cleaning the wound, I grabbed a stitch kit so I could stitch the wound closed. She meowed loudly as the needle went into her stomach. Thankfully, Henry was there to help calm her down. He was gentle and kind to her. It warmed my heart to see someone else care about this as much as I do. He rubbed her head until her eyes were closed, and she looked comfortable and nuzzled against him. I was able to finish closing her wound, and then I wrapped her in a small bandage to keep her from tearing the stitches out with her paws. "I'll get her a small bowl of water," Henry suggested as he made his way over to the sink. He came back moments later with a bowl filled with water, and he placed it down next to her. She opened her eyes and peered over at the bowl, curiously for a moment. I could tell she wanted it, but she was struggling to get to her feet. I helped her stand and brought her to the bowl. She drank the water happily, and she looked so refreshed. "I think I'll name her Snowball," I said, rubbing her head gently. "You're going to keep her?" Henry asked, gazing over at me. "If Sebastian allows it," I answered, remembering how cold Sebastian was earlier when I asked him to help me save the kitten. He wouldn't even give me the time of day. I shuddered, brushing the thought out of my mind. "Thank you for helping me, Henry," I said, smiling at him. "I can't just deny the Luna Queen," he said in return, also with a smile. Before I could say any more words, the door of the infirmary swung open. Doc. Conway stood from his desk again and bowed immediately as Sebastian stormed into the room. I could feel his darkened aura and the anger he was trying so desperately to keep in. "He's pissed," Nora said as Sebastian made his way over to us. "Leave," he barked, staring at Henry. I saw Henry's face paling and his body trembling slightly. He was trying to keep himself together. I could tell Sebastian brought a lot of fear to Henry, and he wasn't going to stick around to see what kind of things Sebastian was capable of doing. "Don't make me repeat myself," Sebastian growled in a low and threatening tone. Henry gave me one more look before running off. Dr. Conway was watching the entire thing with wide and frightened eyes, probably asking himself if he should leave as well. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Sebastian hissed at me, keeping his eyes locked on mine. I pulled my gaze away from him to look at Snowball. "What does it look like?" I asked. I could hear Dr. Conway sucking in a sharp breath. He probably never heard anyone talking back to Sebastian like that before. She was going to die if we didn't help her. "Who was that man?" Sebastian asked through a tightened jaw. I glanced up at him with a frown. "The new gardener," I answered, confused that he didn't know his own staff. "Did you hire him?" "No," Sebastian answered without hesitation. I guess it wasn't that weird that Sebastian didn't hire or even know of Henry. Magnolia often hired the staff around the palace without Sebastian's knowledge. Maybe she hired Henry before she got herself locked in the dungeon. "I don't like you hanging around him," Sebastian said, eyeing me carefully. "I wasn't hanging around him," I said with an eye roll. "He was helping me." "Even so," he said in return. I had to keep myself from rolling my eyes again. I didn't want to argue about this. We've been arguing so much lately, and I felt completely out of it. For a few moments while we were rescuing the kitten, I almost forgot that I was pregnant with Sebastian's baby. It still didn't feel real to me. I was reminded of it when a wave of nausea hit me. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat, hoping that it didn't turn into vomit. I didn't want to vomit all over Sebastian because then he would question why I was still sick. If I still wasn't well, then I shouldn't be out of bed. I decided to take my mind off the nauseous feeling and change the subject before the argument continued. "Can I keep her?" I asked, peering up at him through my lashes. His frown deepened as he stared down at the kitten. "The cat?" he asked with disgust clear in his tone. He sounded like that was the most disgusting thing he had ever heard. "Yes," I answered. "Can I keep the cat? I already named her Snowball." His lip curled up in even more disgust. He was silent for a moment as he thought about it, but then his eyes met mine, and he sighed. "Fine," he muttered, "but you're responsible for it." "Thank you," I said happily, turning back to the cat and rubbing her head. "Hear that, Snowball? You get to live with me." Sebastian rolled his eyes and turned away from me. He started walking toward the door. "Stay away from that gardener," he muttered over his shoulder. I stared at his back, feeling a wave of fury going through me. "Henry is my friend," I told him firmly, folding my arms across my chest. He paused and turned back to me. "Your friend?" he growled. His eyes started flashing between dark blue and scarlet. He was trying to keep himself under control and to keep his wolf calm. "I'm sure he's after more than just your friendship." "What is that supposed to mean?" I couldn't help but yell in return. "Why else would he show up out of nowhere?" Sebastian asked, eyeing me carefully. "Yeah, well, at least he shows up when I need him." Sebastian's POV. Sebastian needed to leave the infirmary before he said or did something he was seriously going to regret. He felt a wave of fury surging through him, and he tightened his jaw to keep himself quiet. He could feel Dr. Conway shaking in his skin as he stood by his desk, watching the argument unfold before him. Hannah looked furious. She continued to stare at him with her brows furrowed together and her lips pressed together until they were forming a thin line. He wasn't sure why she was so determined to defend that gardener. "Yeah, well, at least he shows up when I need him." Her words continued playing in his mind long after he left the infirmary. He allowed her to keep the cat against his better judgment, and that was what she had to say to him for it. He was annoyed and aggravated. He needed to be alone before he completely lost control, so he went back to his office to continue his work. He was going to pretend that conversation never happened and move on with his life. He was sure that she would take in his threats and his warning and stay away from the gardener going forward. He wasn't sure how long he's been in his office. Ever since the rumors about the moonstone scepter spread around the kingdom, he's been receiving nothing but emails after emails. He's been responding to them the best he could, trying to put these rumors to rest and bring ease to the kingdom. But he knew it was going to take a lot more than a couple of emails to silence the rumors. He heard a knock on his door, and he immediately knew who it was. He knew that knock anywhere. "Come in," he said before turning back to his computer. Hannah opened the door and stood there with her eyes shifted to the ground. His office was instantly filled with her scent, bringing him a sense of tranquility. "Dinner is being served in the dining hall," she told him, her voice soft. He lifted his gaze from his computer and stared her over carefully. "Why are you the one informing me and not a maid?" Sebastian asked. "Valerie wasn't feeling well, so I gave her the rest of the night off. The other servants were busy with their duties, and I didn't want to disturb them for something I can do myself," she told him. She was much calmer than she had been earlier that day when they fought in the infirmary. He wondered what changed and why she was acting differently. She wouldn't even meet his eyes. She kept her eyes locked on the ground. She looked almost uncomfortable. "I'll be down in a minute," he told her, turning back to his computer. She nodded her head and left his office in a hurry. He finished with his work for the evening and went to join Hannah in the dining hall for dinner. One of the kitchen servants had already placed their food and was in the middle of pouring their wine when Sebastian entered. The servant bowed instantly, and Hannah's gaze shifted to her food. Sebastian stared at her curiously, wondering what was running through her mind. She's been acting different since that morning she found out her handmaiden, Caroline, was dead. Of course, Sebastian understood why she was upset. It was a detail he hadn't told her, and she felt hurt and betrayed by that knowledge. She felt like she could no longer trust him, but he only kept it from her because she was healing, and he didn't want to disrupt that. He allowed her to have a funeral, though, and he thought she would be okay afterward. Apparently not. She's still distant from him. She hardly looks at him and doesn't like speaking to him unless she's yelling or asking for favors. He stopped looking at her saddened features long enough to eat his food. They ate silently. "Say something to her," Eric scolded. "She's obviously upset about something." "If she wanted to talk, she would," Sebastian said to his wolf in return. "I'm not going to push it. She's our chosen mate. You need to treat her with more kindness and stop being such a dick." Sebastian didn't respond to his wolf. He looked over at Hannah, who was staring down at her food. She had stopped eating and was just twirling the food around with her fork. "Do you not like it?" he asked, eyeing her carefully. "I could have them cook you something else." She glanced up at him, her face reddening slightly once she realized he was watching her. "No, it's okay," she answered. "It's delicious, really." "Why aren't you eating it then?" he asked, raising his brows. "I guess I just have a lot on my mind," she answered, her tone remaining soft. "I actually wanted to talk to you about something." "Go on," turning back to his food and taking another bite. "Classes at Blue Moon are starting again. Since the attack, they've had everything on hold, but I got an email saying they are continuing classes this week." Sebastian looked back at her, narrowing his eyes to focus on her features. She refused to meet his eyes. He could tell she was nervous about asking to go back to Blue Moon. "She can't go back," Eric hissed. "It's too dangerous. She needs to be here with us. She needs to remain close to us." Sebastian agreed. "I don't feel comfortable with you going back to Blue Moon," he answered, keeping his tone calm and without looking at her. "Not after what happened last time." She was silent for a moment, processing what he had just said. "I just thought since the ones who started the attack are either dead or imprisoned, that it'd be safe again, and you'd let me." "I said no," Sebastian said, cutting off her words. She flinched at his harsh tone, and she shifted her gaze back down to her food. He felt a painful sensation tugging at his chest as she stared around her sad features. Tears began drowning her eyes, and she was trying hard to keep them inside of her eyes and not allow them to wash over her cheeks. He sighed, putting down his fork and leaning back in his seat so he could take her in. "Is Raya going back?" Sebastian asked. She glanced up at him, surprised by his question. I'm not sure," she answered. "Probably not, honestly. Not after what happened with her there. I don't think Arnold would want her to go back anyway." "Then why the hell would I let you go back?" he asked, tilting his head to the side. "Do you honestly think I want you in that kind of danger?" "I guess not," she agreed. "Just be grateful I'm letting you keep that cat and I'm allowing the gardener to keep his job," Sebastian muttered, as he slid his seat back so he could stand up. He was done with dinner, and he felt no need to stay in the dining hall any longer. Hannah remained at her seat, her eyes fixated on her plate, and she nodded. "I am grateful," she said softly. "Thank you." He said nothing as he left the dining hall. He hated acting so coldly toward her, but he wasn't sure how else to get through to her. She needed to understand that he was only doing this for her best interest. If he was any kinder to her, she would grow daring again and go against him. Hannah was a rule breaker when she got comfortable. Going to that rogue town without his knowledge was proof of that, and he wasn't going to make that mistake again. He needed to keep her close, to keep her safe, and to keep her close. She needed to have a little fear in her, so she would be afraid to branch out and go against him. Sebastian made his way back into his office, and he sat at his desk. He rubbed his sore temples. He pictured the sadness in Hannah's eyes, and it pulled at his heart. With a sigh, he grabbed his phone and dialed the number to Blue Moon Academy. "Hello, Dr. Montgomery?" Sebastian's POV. "What can I have the honor for this call, Your Majesty?" Dr. Montgomery said on the other end. "I understand that you're continuing classes this week?" Sebastian asked. "Yes, that is correct," she confirmed. "Is there a problem? Do you feel it is wise?" Sebastian asked. He couldn't help the skepticism in his tone. She was hesitant for a moment before answering. If you're asking if it's safe for students to return to campus, then yes, it is safe," she said in response. "The attackers have been dealt with and are banned from campus grounds. They are currently dealing with my husband at the PAX jail. I also understand that you have one of the attackers in your PAX jail as well?" "Yes," Sebastian answered. "This particular attacker messed with the wrong people, and we will deal with him as we see fit." "That's fair," Dr. Montgomery responded. "I sent out notices to everyone's families apologizing for what had happened. I know it doesn't make anything better, but I wanted everyone to know that we don't take things like that lightly, and we are working on resolving issues." "It's been received," Sebastian told her. "I appreciate your efforts to keep the academy safe. I hope you understand if something like this happens again, I will be putting matters into my own hands." "I'm sorry, Your Majesty," Dr. Montgomery asked, sounding confused. "Blue Moon is part of my kingdom, and I don't particularly enjoy violence around the kingdom, especially at schools where students are expected to be safe. If something like this happens again, I will personally shut the school down and investigate each member of your pack. I also feel new enrollment policies should be in place. I'll email you a list of requirements for each student when they enroll going forward. I also feel the alpha of the pack should make an appearance at the school occasionally to keep everyone in check." "Yes, Your Majesty," Dr. Montgomery agreed. "I'll make sure he does." "See that you do, and if you don't, I will," Sebastian threatened, but he kept his voice calm. "Of course," Dr. Montgomery said in return. "I've been meaning to ask, will your Luna be returning to the academy as well?" "That's the main reason why I'm calling. She would like to return, but I don't feel comfortable with her going to that school right now. I feel she needs to remain in the safety of King's Pack and near me. However, she would like to return to further her education." "We would love to have her back," Dr. Montgomery said quickly and eagerly. "She's a bright student with a lot of potential." "Yes, despite how poorly she's been treated since arriving there," Sebastian said coldly. Dr. Montgomery was speechless. "I saw how her superiors spoke to her, and I wasn't happy about it. I will speak to them right away," she said, her words trembling slightly. He could tell she was growing even more nervous. "I had no idea she was treated poorly. If I had known—" "Enough," Sebastian stopped her words again. "I'm not looking for excuses. I'm just saying I don't feel comfortable with her returning there in person. What I would like is for her to continue her courses online. Yes, of course, Dr. Montgomery agreed. We have wonderful online courses she could take. The only thing is she will still need to intern at a hospital if she wants to graduate. We have a hospital here she can work at, Sebastian told her. Perfect, Dr. Montgomery said. He could hear her typing something on her computer. I'll email you the online course schedule along with a sign-in for the module. I appreciate that, Dr. Montgomery. We will be in touch, Sebastian said as he hung up the phone. Hannah's POV. I sat in my room alone for most of the night. I wanted so badly to return to Blue Moon Academy and continue my education, but it didn't look like that was going to happen. All I wanted to do was cry, but I had to keep the tears in so Sebastian wouldn't see my weakness. Part of me wanted to escape to school because of my pregnancy. If I stayed here longer, it would only be a matter of time before Sebastian found out that I was pregnant. How long are you planning on keeping that from him? Nora asked, her voice echoing in my head. I don't know, I admitted. I can't tell him, at least not right now, not until I know what I'm going to do. What does that mean? Nora asked, surprised by my words. You need to have this baby. I knew she was right. Sebastian would know for sure if I aborted our child, and he would despise me for the rest of my life. He might even kill me. I couldn't go behind his back and do something like that. That wasn't an option. I had to have this baby, and I needed to tell Sebastian the truth. I just needed to figure out when and how. I had to brush the thought out of my mind before I go insane thinking about it. Hannah? A familiar voice sounded in my mind. It was Henry. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I haven't heard from you since this morning in the infirmary. The king looked mad and I was worried about you, he said. It was nice that he cared enough about me to reach out to me. But I knew it was a dangerous game he was playing. I couldn't continue a friendship that Sebastian wasn't okay with, despite how innocent Henry seemed. I'm okay, I assured him. Where are you? In the rose garden, where we first met, he answered. Care to join me? I wanted to say yes, but I knew it wasn't a good idea. Before I could answer him, the door of the bedroom swung open, and Sebastian stood before me. Had he heard our mind-link conversation? Knowing Sebastian, that was very likely. A knot formed in my stomach as he stared around his face. His mask in place kept me from seeing his expression, but his eyes were his natural dark blues, so I could tell he wasn't angry. I just got off the phone with Dr. Montgomery, he said. My eyes widened. I had to work hard to contain myself. What did he speak with Dr. Montgomery about? She's allowing you to continue your classes online going forward, he told me. What? I breathed. I was surprised by his words. You will be doing online courses and you will work at the King's Hospital to continue your internship, he explained. That's the only way I'm allowing you to continue your education. Take it or leave it. I'll take it, I said quickly. Thank you. It was better than nothing. Excitement rolled through me. I was going to be able to finish my schooling and better my education. I was happy with that. He didn't respond. He took his shirt off and came over to the bed. A knot forming in my stomach kept me from breathing. I stared around his amazing body, and I felt my heart beating rapidly in my chest. He slid into the bed beside me. I have a meeting tomorrow, so I need sleep, he muttered as he closed his eyes. I lay down at well. I knew he would question me if I left the bed, so I had to stay put. I said nothing to him as he drifted off to sleep. Tomorrow, I finally responded to Henry. We will meet tomorrow in the rose garden. Hannah's POV. I hadn't slept a full night in what felt like a long time, but I was finally able to sleep. Maybe it was because Sebastian was allowing me to return to school, even if it was online courses. Maybe it was also because I finally had a small group of friends and didn't feel as lonely. Whatever it was, I was glad to be able to get a little bit of sleep. Sleeping beside Sebastian didn't hurt as well. His body was so warm, it was like sleeping beside a heater. He enjoyed sleeping with his arms wrapped around me so he would be close to me. I didn't dislike being close to him. As worried as I was about this pregnancy and about being around him, I couldn't deny that Nora felt her calmest when she was near him. His scent was like chocolate, making my heart flutter and my mouth water. He was so deliciously perfect that I found it difficult to keep my distance from him. There's been a lot of fear when it comes to my relationship with Sebastian, especially since I found out I was pregnant and discovered how terrible my mother felt in her relationship with my father. It was because he forcibly marked her, just like Sebastian had done to me. My mother felt she didn't have a choice, and she was automatically drawn to him because of that mark. I couldn't help but wonder if that's the reason I felt drawn to Sebastian. I shuddered at the thought. By the time I woke up the next morning, Sebastian was gone. Valerie had breakfast for me in the dining hall. I wasn't hungry, but if I didn't eat, word would get back to Sebastian, and he would be upset with me. He didn't like it when I go all day without eating. Once I finished my food, I made my way to the back door of the palace. I told Henry that I would meet him in the rose garden this morning. I was a bit apprehensive about seeing him behind Sebastian's back. I knew he would be angry if he found out. I thought a lot about what I was going to say to Henry, and I knew I needed to end our friendship. It wasn't going to be easy. "Oh, good morning, Hannah," Raya said before I reached the back door. Her cheeks were flushed, and her hair was a mess. I eyed her carefully, humor dancing in my eyes. "Did you have a good night?" I asked her, raising my eyebrows and trying to keep the smile from tugging at my lips. Her face grew even redder, and she looked startled by my question. I noticed there was a tooth mark on the back of her neck, and my eyes widened. "He marked you?" I gasped. Her hand instantly reached to the back of her neck, and she touched her newly placed wolf mark. "Yes," she admitted. "Last night, when we—" Her words trailed off. She didn't need to finish her sentence. I threw my arms around her and embraced her tightly. "Oh, Raya," I breathed. "I'm so happy for you." "Thank you," she giggled. "It's surreal, but it feels right, you know. I didn't, mainly because my mark was forced, and it didn't feel right at all. But I was so happy she found her fated mate and that they were happy." "I should get back to him," she said. "I was only grabbing something to eat." I waved my goodbyes to her as I went out the back door. I was surprised that Henry was patiently waiting for me in the rose garden. We never established a time to meet up, so I wasn't expecting him to be here already. But there he was, sitting on the stone bench in the center of the rose garden, patiently waiting for my arrival. He smiled broadly as he saw me approaching. He stood up quickly and met me the rest of the way. "I was beginning to think you weren't coming," he said. I looked up at him, knowing I had to do this. "We need to talk about something." "I'm sorry if I got you in trouble," he said, interrupting my words. "It's just not often that I'm able to make a friend. I work so much that I don't really have time for anything else." "You do other work besides being the gardener at this palace?" I asked, raising my eyebrows. "Yes," he answered. "I work in a couple of different places around the kingdom, so I can make as much money as I can. It's just been really hard." My heart tugged at his words. I could tell there was more to his story that he wasn't saying, and I felt weird bringing up ending our friendship. "So, how's Snowball?" he asked as we slowly walked through the garden. "I checked on her before bed last night, and she seemed good," I told him. "Dr. Conway is keeping watch of her in the infirmary. I'm not going to bring her through the rest of the palace until she is more healed and stable." "That's probably a good idea," he agreed. "It looked like it pained her to walk. She's in good hands with you caring for her." "I appreciate that," I said kindly. He was so nice it pained my heart to have to stop talking to him. There's something off about him. Sebastian is right. We should be wary. "I will end the friendship," I assured my wolf. "But now might not be the best time." "I've always wanted to be a doctor," Henry said, bringing my attention back to him. I glanced up at him, surprise clear on my face. "Why didn't you?" I asked. "It takes up a lot of time. I don't have the money for the education or the time for internships," he answered. "But maybe someday I will." "Do you enjoy healing?" I asked. He shrugged. "It would be useful if I knew how to heal," he said in return. "It's something I would like to learn." "I think it's something you should learn if it interests you," I told him. "I can always see if Dr. Conway could use some extra help in the infirmary. He might be able to help you." "You'd do that for me?" he asked with a fond smile. "Of course," I told him. I noticed how kind his smile is, and it made my heart happy knowing that I could make someone smile like that. I couldn't remember the last time I saw Sebastian smile. He was always so angry or concerned or upset about something. Stress consumed him daily, and oftentimes I felt helpless. "Henry, listen." My words were stopped by the sound of my phone ringing and buzzing in my pocket. I grabbed it, and my heart sank when I saw that it was Dr. Davis. "Was something wrong with Liam?" "Hello." "Hannah, you should come to the hospital right away. It's Liam." Dr. Davis confirmed my fears, and I felt a knot forming in the pit of my stomach. "What's wrong? What happened?" I asked quickly, meeting the worried eyes of Henry. Liam's heart stopped. Hannah's POV. My first thought was to call Sebastian and tell him what was happening, but he was in the middle of a meeting, and I couldn't bother him about this. I felt panic rising through me as I thought about my brother. Dr. Davis told me he was stable. However, he still hasn't woken up. Something was seriously wrong. He should have been awake by now. Henry was staring around my face for a long while before offering to take me to the hospital. I didn't have much of an option. He parked his truck nearby, and I slid into the passenger seat as he got into the driver's seat. He didn't ask any questions until we reached the hospital. The drive was silent as I processed my thoughts. I was shaking in the seat, trying to keep myself from crying. As we arrived at the hospital, we made our way to Liam's room. He lay in his bed. He was thin and pale. It tugged at my heart to see him like this. He had a bunch of tubes sticking out of him and needles in his arms. He looked so peaceful and asleep, but I knew he was struggling to stay alive. Warm tears spread across my features and dripped off my chin, soaking through my shirt. My body shook as I sobbed into my hands. I sat at my brother's bed. His skin was cold, so I added a blanket to him. I hated this for him. He didn't deserve what was happening. Henry stayed by the door silently. He watched me with such concern and sadness in his own eyes. I'm sure he was confused about what was happening. I hadn't told him I had a brother, and I didn't tell him that he was sick in the hospital. I wasn't sure how to bring something like that up, but I guess he knew now. "How old is he?" Henry asked, keeping his tone low. 19, I answered. "Only a year younger than me." "He's so young," he breathed. I could tell something was running through his mind. "I'm sorry he's going through that. My thoughts are with you and your family." "He's the only family I have," I told him through my tears. "Since my mother died, we don't have anyone else." "What about your father?" he asked. I shook my head sadly and met his eyes. "My father is hardly a father," I told him. "He's an alpha and has a new family. He abandoned us because my brother and I were born Omegas." Henry stayed silent. I couldn't help but wonder what he was thinking. I hadn't told Henry that I was only an Omega. I wondered if he looked down on me now. But to my surprise, he came closer to me. I continued to cry into my hands and allowed him to wrap his arms around me and pull me in for a hug. He held me as I cried into his shirt. My body felt frail, and I could hardly hold myself up anymore. I could use all the support I could get. "I get what you mean," he whispered to me. "I have an ill sister as well. She's young too. She's honestly the only family I have." I peered up at him through my tear-soaked eyes. "Really?" I asked, surprised by this new piece of information. I had no idea he was in the same boat as me. "Yes," he answered. "That's why I work so much. That's why I too want to be a healer. I don't have the money to get her help, so I work so I can take care of her." "I'm so sorry you have to go through this alone," I breathed. I found myself feeling fortunate that I at least had Sebastian to help support me. He was the one paying to get my brother the help he needed. He's also allowing me a chance to become a healer myself, so I can continue to support my brother and find a cure for his illness. That was something my father wouldn't do for my mother. He only kept Liam alive after my mother died, so he could get me to do his bidding and use my brother against me. Without Sebastian, my brother's life would still be in the hands of my father. He probably wouldn't be alive right now. Thinking about Sebastian with gratitude, I found myself missing him. "I can always try to take a look at her at some point," I offered. "Maybe there's something I can do." His eyes widened. "You would do that?" he asked, shocked. "Of course," I confirmed. This only made him hug me tighter. It felt good to feel embraced. Not as good as it felt to be embraced by Sebastian, but it was nice, especially during these hard times with Liam. Before we could break apart, the door swung open, and a familiar presence filled the area. I felt all sorts of annoyance coursing through my body as Nancy stood before us. She was staring at us dumbfounded for a moment before a grin broke across her face. With everything going on in my life, I completely forgot she even existed. She was moved to a different section of the hospital during my last few weeks working here, so I didn't see her much before I left. I'm sure she heard how I quit, though, and she couldn't wait to take all my patients from me. I rolled my eyes as she folded her arms across her chest. "Well, this is rich," she said, humor lacing her words and dancing in her eyes. I stepped away from Henry. We weren't doing anything, so I shouldn't feel ashamed. But part of me knew that if this got back to Sebastian, he would have the last word. "If it isn't the Luna Queen herself, with someone who doesn't look like the Wolf King," Nancy laughed. Her laugh sent a chill down my spine. Henry looked between the two of us, confused. "He's just a friend, Nancy," I muttered, turning back to my brother. "Does your husband know you have a really good-looking male friend?" Nancy asked, eyeing him like he was a piece of candy. I felt myself growing angry. "How about you mind your own business?" I shot back, trying not to let my temper get the best of me. Nora wanted to rip her head off, though, and I was seconds away from letting her. "I'm going to assume that's no," Nancy sneered as she grabbed her phone out of her pocket. "Say cheese for the camera," she laughed. Soon the flash of her camera went off, nearly blinding us. Sebastian's POV. The meeting lasted what felt like an eternity. Sebastian spent time trying to convince the alphas of surrounding packs that his possession of the moonstone scepter was just a rumor. He told them they needed to silence the rumor spreaders around the kingdom and stop with the nonsense. As the day went on, he started to worry about Hannah. He had a weird feeling in the pit of his stomach that something was wrong. It was almost like he could feel her sad emotions. "It's the mate bond," Eric informed him. "We can feel when she's not okay, emotionally and physically." That only confirmed it. Something was wrong with their chosen mate. But he couldn't leave in the middle of the meeting. He just had to wait until it was over before he went to find Hannah. He hoped she was at the palace, even though he knew the likelihood of that was slim. Just as the meeting ended, he stood from his seat and raced out the door. He ran quickly until the palace came into view, but stopped suddenly at the sound of his wolf's voice. "She's not there," he said urgently. "She's at the hospital." "The hospital?" Sebastian asked, breathlessly in his mind. "I don't feel like she's hurt." "No, she's not," Eric confirmed. "It must have been her brother. Something must have happened with Liam." He was about to run to the hospital, but another familiar voice roamed through his head via the mind link. "Alpha," Arnold said urgently. "You need to look at the newest news story right away." Sebastian wasted no time. He grabbed his phone and went into his news app. Then he saw a picture of Hannah at the hospital with her brother. Beside her looked like a very startled and stupid gardener. Hannah's POV. "Thank you for taking me home," I said to Henry as we neared the palace in his truck. I could have walked. Part of me was hoping he would have let me walk. Nora needed to stretch her legs, and it would be good to go for a run in my wolf form to clear my head. But that would have to wait till later. Henry insisted that he took me home to make sure I got back safely. He also mentioned he had to get some stuff finished in the gardens anyway. "It's no problem," he said softly as he parked his truck. "I'm sorry again about your brother. I hope he's strong enough to overcome this." My heart felt heavy because it's been a lifetime battle with my brother. At one point he was strong enough to overcome anything, but as the years went on, the weaker he became. I'm not sure he had many fights left in him. "I'm sorry about Nancy," I told him, trying to keep the annoyance out of my tone. "She took a picture of us together in Liam's room, and I knew she was going to use that picture to blackmail me later. It was something I would have to deal with when the time came. I just needed to figure out what she wanted and what it would take to get that picture from her. I couldn't let Sebastian see it because he would lose his mind." "Yeah, what's her deal?" he asked, eyeing me from the driver's seat. I sighed before answering him. "She's my half-sister's best friend. They aren't people I get along with," I muttered. "I just ignore them, and they usually go away." "Sounds frustrating," he agreed. "Thanks again for the ride home," I said, sliding out of his truck. He followed me until we reached the palace grounds, and then we went our separate ways. I should have ended our friendship right there and then, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not like this. I knew Sebastian was home before I even entered. I was just hoping he didn't see me getting out of Henry's truck. He was probably confused as to why I wasn't home. It was nearing evening, and I wasn't usually gone this long, unless something was wrong. I would have to explain to him that it was because something was wrong with my brother. The butler stood at the door, and he looked a bit grim when he first saw me. I narrowed my eyes at him, confused as to why he was looking at me like that. He bowed his head once I entered. "Your Majesty," he greeted, "the Alpha King is waiting for you in the den." I frowned, and I could feel my heart racing against my chest. He was waiting for me? I found that to be weird. Even Nora felt like something was wrong before we even entered the den. Sebastian sat on the couch with a piece of paper in his hands. He was looking at the paper intently for a moment before bringing his eyes to rest on me. He looked oddly calm, which only made me more nervous. "Is something wrong?" I asked, eyeing him carefully. "Is something wrong?" He growled, standing to his feet quickly. His tone was hard, and the way he stared at me was cold, sending a shiver down my spine. "I gave you direct orders to stay away from that gardener, and you run off with him?" "What are you talking about?" I asked, keeping my eyes locked on his. He revealed the paper he was holding. It was a picture of me with Henry at the hospital in Liam's room. I swallowed the lump that was forming in my throat, trying to figure out what to say to him. I knew nothing I said could make him feel better at that moment. He was right. I did go away with Henry, but it wasn't what he was thinking. "I got a phone call from Dr. Davis. Liam was in trouble," I told him, proud that my voice remained stable. "And you didn't think to tell me?" he asked. I was surprised by how calm he was. Instead of the normal scarlet his eyes would turn, I just saw a flash of hurt. I had hurt him. "You weren't home. You were at a meeting," I reminded him, keeping my tone low. "I was in the gardens when I got the call. I shouldn't have gone behind your back to see him. But he's my friend. I need you to understand that." Sebastian sighed. "I don't trust that guy, Hannah. There's something off about him. I don't even remember hiring him." I frowned and thought it was odd that he just appeared out of nowhere. Nora also mentioned having a weird feeling about him, but he seemed so nice. "Do you think Patricia hired him before she was imprisoned?" I asked, peering up at his concerned gaze. "Possibly," he muttered in return. "I just want you to be careful." I gave him a small smile as I stepped closer to him. I knew it was my scent that's been keeping him under control. He seemed to relax with my nearness. "I'm careful," I whispered in return. At that moment, I thought about telling him about my pregnancy. I knew I needed to say something about it, despite all the fear I'd been feeling. Every time I thought about telling him, I thought about how my mother suffered in a loveless marriage because my father marked her. I didn't want the same fate for myself, but I also understand that Sebastian is not my father. However, he did forcibly mark me. Maybe right now isn't the best time to tell him. "Hannah, I need to see you right away. Can you meet me in the gardens?" Henry's voice came through a mind link. He sounded distraught. I glanced up at Sebastian, who seemed lost in his own thoughts. "I promise I'm careful," I repeated to him. "Henry just mind-linked me. Something is wrong. I need to go see what it is." Sebastian furrowed his eyebrows at me. "Are you serious?" he muttered, aggravation returning to his voice. "Hannah, I know," I said, cutting him off. "But I need you to trust me." He didn't look happy, but he took a step away. "Fine," he said before turning away and walking out of the living room. I stared after him, feeling a heaviness in my heart. I didn't like going against him, but Henry was my friend, and it sounded like he needed something. I ran from the living room and out the back door until I was engulfed in the night's air and surrounded by beautiful flowers. Henry was already there, pacing back and forth. He looked nervous and frightened. He relaxed once he saw me approaching, but I could still see the fear lingering behind his eyes. "Henry, what is it?" I asked, peering up at him. "It's my sister," he breathed. "She's not okay. Her condition is worse. I can't afford a doctor, and I don't know what to do." I stared at him for a moment. He needed a doctor for his sister. I glanced over at the palace, and I knew Sebastian was waiting for me to return. I couldn't let Henry's sister die. If there's something I can do for her, then I gotta try. I turned back to him. Let's go. Sebastian's POV. What are you doing, you fool? Eric growled as Sebastian left the living room, leaving Hannah behind. You were gonna let her go to him? You told her to stay away. Stand your ground. We are pushing her further away, Sebastian retorted, annoyed as he stormed up the stairs. The further he got from Hannah, the more out of it he was beginning to feel. Eric was growing tense, and Sebastian knew it was only a matter of time before his madness returned. We are going to lose her to him, Eric said. Sebastian could feel the anxiety boiling from within him. We need to be able to trust her, Sebastian said as he barged into the bathroom. He needed to take an ice bath to calm his wolf and himself. Eric wasn't happy with Sebastian's decision, but Sebastian knew he needed to trust Hannah. She looked worried when she mentioned that Henry mind-linked her. Regardless of what Sebastian said to her at that moment, it wouldn't do any good. Hannah was a stubborn wolf and would do what she pleased anyway. He just hoped that she knew what she was doing. Hannah's POV. We will go see your sister, I told him again. He looked surprised by my words. I'll see if there's something I can do for her. Really? He asked, raising his brows. What about Sebastian? I looked at the palace again, knowing Sebastian was going to be furious with me, but I shook my head, dismissing the thought and turning back to Henry. This is important. Let's see if we can save your sister, I told him. I'll deal with Sebastian later. He nodded and led me to his truck. Thankfully, Henry's house wasn't far from the palace. We managed to get there within a few minutes. He lived in a small brick house with a small yard. There were some flowers around the lawn, which made sense considering he was a gardener. Can I get you anything? He asked as we entered his house. Tea or something? He kept his house clean. There were a couple of bookshelves, a couch, and a television occupying his living room. No, I told him. I shouldn't stay here long. Where's your sister? He looked hesitant for a moment. She's upstairs in her room, he told me, meeting my eyes. Follow me. I took in a steady breath to calm my nerves. Something about being in this house was making me uncomfortable. I trusted Henry, but Nora was still so wary of him, and the fact that Sebastian doesn't feel comfortable with me being around him made me worry as well. I probably should mind-link Sebastian and let him know where I am. I can't get through to him. Nora breathed nervously. Something is blocking the mind link. That wasn't good. I paused at the bottom of the stairs before following Henry the rest of the way. What could be blocking my mind link from Sebastian? Maybe your sister should come downstairs, and I can look at her down here, I suggested. He paused at the top of the stairs and frowned. She can't use the stairs, he told me. She's too sick. Just be quick, Nora warned. Take a look at her and then let's get out of here. I don't like it here. I made my way up the stairs and followed him down a long and narrow hallway. He didn't even bother to turn on any lights. It was light enough where I could see, but dark enough where I was uncomfortable. Eventually, he paused in front of a door and looked at me. Are you okay? You seem weird, he said, eyeing me carefully. I'm fine, I said with a smile. I just don't want to be here too long. Sebastian will be upset that I left without mentioning anything to him. I'll get you back there soon, he promised. I just need someone to take a look at her. I nodded as he opened the door and motioned for me to enter first. The room was dark. This time I couldn't see anything. He shut the door behind him, enclosing us in the dark oasis this room held. I felt an odd sensation from the room. Typically, I can feel a presence when I'm around someone, even if I can't see them. But in this case, I wasn't feeling anyone besides Henry and the dark presence I was beginning to sense. I waited until Henry turned on a light. Sure enough, I found the room to be empty. There was a bed, but it didn't seem like anyone had slept in it for a long time. I couldn't help but be completely confused about what I was looking at until I heard the door latch from behind me. He locked it. I turned around quickly to see Henry standing there. He looked a bit nervous, and his eyes were shifted to the ground. He stayed silent for a long while, hearing nothing but the sounds of my heavy breathing. I knew something was weird, Nora breathed into my mind. We shouldn't have come here. Henry, what's going on? I heard myself asking. I tried to keep my voice strong, but I knew some of my nervousness was leaking into my words. I can't explain, he said calmly, meeting my eyes. I don't have a sister. You lied to me? I asked, my voice raising slightly as I took a step away from him. For a good reason, he answered. Are you even a gardener? I asked, keeping my eyes locked on his. He was hesitant before answering. No, I felt my heart sinking into my stomach and a giant knot forming. Sebastian was right. I needed to try to mind-link Sebastian again, but every time I tried, it would fail. I can't shift either, Nora said, sounding defeated. Something is blocking our werewolf powers. Please, just listen to me, Henry said calmly. I needed to figure out how to get you away from the palace so we could talk. Why did you bring me here, Henry? I asked firmly through a clenched jaw. I was angry with him for lying to me. I was angry at him for betraying me and pulling me away from my husband. When Sebastian finds out about this, he was going to rip Henry's throat out with his teeth. Why aren't my powers working? Because of the shield I have around my house, Henry answered. It keeps my house and anyone inside private. Why do you need to be private? I asked, narrowing my eyes at him. How could you lie to me? Why am I here? Please, just calm down and listen to me, he breathed, motioning for me to sit down. I shook my head, refusing to comply with his orders. Take me home, I demanded. I can't do that, he said. He was treating me like I was an animal about to pounce on him. Hell, I felt like an animal about to pounce on him. I was shaking with fury, and the only thing keeping me from shifting and tearing him apart myself was the fact that I was inside of some shield that was blocking my powers. Why? I finally asked after a long pause. Because you're my fated mate. What? I gasped, my entire body stilled at his words. As I stared around his face, I saw how serious he was. Nora was quiet as she processed what he was saying. She wasn't sure what to say, and I wasn't sure what to say. This couldn't have been real. He's been lying to me, and there was no doubt in my mind that he was lying to me about this too. You're lying, I growled. That's all you've been doing is lying. I promise, I'm not, he assured me softly, keeping his tone even. I needed to get you out of that palace. Sebastian isn't whom you think he is. What the hell does that mean? I asked, fury rising through me. Sebastian doesn't really love you, Henry said firmly. He's the one lying to you. He's the one harming your wolf. Hannah, what do you mean Sebastian is harming my wolf? I snapped, refusing to believe his cruel words. I hated that I couldn't shift and break out of this room. I needed to somehow get out of here and return home to Sebastian. I needed to know what Henry was talking about, but I didn't want to hear it from Henry. I needed to hear it from Sebastian. He's using you to help his wolf madness, Henry said, sitting down beside me. Your scent for some reason helps calm him. That's the only reason he's keeping you around. If it wasn't for your scent, he would have killed you by now. No, I breathed, shaking my head at him. Maybe at the beginning that's what it was, but it's different now. He's different. No, he's not, Hannah, Henry growled, startling me. He has never raised his voice like this before, and I'm not sure how to react to this new attitude change. Henry sighed, and his gaze fell to the ground. He's dangerous. You must have known from the beginning how dangerous he was. He married you because a prophecy told him that you are essential to his wolf madness. Why else would he choose to marry you? I felt hurt by his words. Sebastian had made a deal with Stephen to marry his daughter, and we all assumed he meant Amy. She was the one he was supposed to marry, but she didn't want to. She feared him, and they made me marry him. It was never me he was supposed to marry. Unless it was. My scent and saliva help him with his wolf madness, and the reasoning is unexplained. Of course, I would never tell Henry any of this. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction of being right. I needed to speak with Sebastian. He's the only one who knows the entire truth. I want to go home, I ordered him, my voice hardened. I need to speak with my husband. Please just listen to me. I need you to trust me. Trust you? I cut in, raising my brows. You've been lying to me since the moment we met. Why should I believe anything you have to say to me right now, Henry? He was quiet for a moment. I knew he was thinking carefully about what to say next. Because I remember the moment we first met, he said. In the rose garden? I asked him, confused. He shook his head. Way before that, when we were kids, he told me. I rose my eyebrows, keeping my eyes locked on his. I don't remember meeting him as a kid. I was very confused. I remember seeing your face after I've been shot. I didn't have the chance to thank you, but you were the one who saved my life. What? I breathed. No, that little boy you saved when you were only a little girl. I was a teen at the time, but I was shot and I was bleeding out in the middle of the road. You saved me, he further explained. I felt the color draining from my face as the wind got sucked out of me. I remembered. I just couldn't believe that it was him. I must have been only 8 years old at the time. My mother allowed me to go to the market in the rogue town we lived in. My brother had fallen ill, and she was worried about leaving him, so she sent me to the market to grab some food. As I went to the market, I found myself roaming close to the border of the kingdom. I knew that I wasn't allowed to wander into the kingdom without my mother, but I couldn't help myself. It was like I was being drawn in. That's when I saw a young boy in the middle of the road. He was lying on the ground, and he was completely alone. He looked to be a teenager, and I knew from his clothing that he belonged to the kingdom. He was fairly close to the border, though, so it surprised me to see him without anyone with him. I ran to him on instinct and knelt on the ground beside him. He was unconscious. He had a bullet in his stomach, and he looked to be losing a lot of blood quickly. I covered his wound with my hands to try and stop the bleeding, but I knew there was no use unless the bullet was completely taken out of him. I searched his clothing for a phone and thankfully came across his cell phone in his pocket. He must be rich, I remembered thinking to myself. Most kids, even teens, didn't have their own cell phones, but his looked new and upgraded. Telling from his clothing, he must have come from a nice family. I instantly called for an ambulance, and they promised to send someone right away once I told them our location. I knew I couldn't just wait around for them to arrive, though. This kid was going to die if I didn't do anything. I felt around his wound until my fingers touched the bullet that was wedged inside of him. I used my small fingers to pry my way inside and dig the bullet out. The pain must have been too great for him because it woke him from his unconscious state. Sweat poured from his face instantly. He screamed out in pain as I dug my way through his wound to get the bullet out of him. I met his dark blue eyes, and he stared at me for a long while, begging for me to stop. "I'm only trying to help you," I assured him. I was hoping I didn't have a lot of fear in my voice. He screamed again as I finally got the bullet out of him. I used my small hands to cover his wound and keep him from losing any more blood. The ambulance arrived shortly after. I watched as they took him away. I never got his name, and I never saw him again after that. I used the river to wash the blood off my body before I went into the marketplace, and then I returned home. "That was you?" I breathed as I stared at Henry with disbelief. "Yes," he answered. "That was me." Sebastian's POV. Sebastian felt much calmer after he finished his ice bath. He drained the tub and put his clothes on before leaving the bathroom. He paused in the hallway when he didn't sense Hannah nearby. Typically, he would be able to sense her as soon as she was on the palace grounds, but it was like she wasn't here at all. She went to see if Henry was okay in the gardens. That was the last he saw or heard from her. Then he went to take an ice bath. He thought she would have returned to their room by now. But when he opened the door, she wasn't there. "She isn't here," Eric growled. "I can't get a hold of her. Something is blocking our mind link." Sebastian shut the door to his room and rushed toward the stairs. One of the maids, Valerie, was making her way up the stairs and paused when she saw him approaching. She looked nervous, but she bowed immediately. "Good evening, sir," she said to him, keeping her tone calm. "Where's Hannah?" he asked her, his tone harsh. She frowned. "I haven't seen her," she said. "Why do you ask? Is everything okay?" "She got a mind link from that gardener, and she went to see if he was okay. That was almost an hour ago, and she hasn't returned yet." "You don't think something happened to her, do you?" Valerie asked, gazing up at him worriedly. Sebastian didn't bother responding to her. He walked away and toward the back door that led into the gardens. As he reached outside, he could still smell her lingering scent. However, it was a distant scent, so he knew she was no longer there. He roamed around the garden anyway, though, hoping to get a stronger scent of her. It wasn't like her to just leave like this. I can't link her, Eric said in a panic. Something is wrong with our chosen mate. Sebastian's POV. I want every Gamma warrior there is to search this kingdom, Sebastian roared to his warriors. I will not rest until Hannah is safe at the palace. Yes, sir, his warriors said in agreement before they departed from the palace. Alpha. He turned to see Arnold running through the foyer with Raya trailing behind him. They both looked worried. What's going on? Hannah is missing, Sebastian told them. What? Raya gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. She's not anywhere? She has me blocked on her mind link. I can't seem to reach her, Sebastian said, trying not to show them his panic. Eric was itching to escape and roam the kingdom himself to search for their chosen mate. He hated that they couldn't sense or figure out where she had gone off to. Maybe you should try to link her, Raya, Sebastian suggested, eyeing Raya carefully. She looked frightened for a moment, but then that turned into determination as she nodded once. After a pause, her face turned pale and her eyes widened. Something's wrong, she whispered, looking up at Arnold with a worried expression. I can't get through to her. There's no way she would block Raya too, Arnold said, turning to Sebastian. That must mean something is wrong with her. That's what worried Sebastian the most. Did she say anything the last time you saw her? Raya asked, staring at Sebastian. She got a mind link from that gardener, Sebastian explained. She went to see if he was okay. I went to clean up, and when I finished, I expected her to be in our room, but she wasn't. I couldn't sense her anywhere around the palace, and I couldn't get through to her. That doesn't sound like her, Raya said, getting lost in her own thoughts. Do you think the gardener did something to her? I didn't trust him from the beginning, but she didn't want to listen to me. She was being stubborn, Sebastian growled. Eric was getting furious at the thought of Hannah being in danger because of that asshole. So, she was in the gardens last? Arnold asked. Are you sure she's not there anymore? I wouldn't have my men searching for her if I wasn't sure, Sebastian shot back. I'll try getting a hold of her again, Raya said, looking between the men. Did you try her cell phone? Yes, Sebastian answered, annoyed. Still nothing. I'll go with the warriors and see if we can track her down, Arnold suggested as he headed toward the door. Raya will stay here and keep trying her phone and mind link. Don't worry, we will find her, Alpha. The moonstone scepter, he heard his wolf-dark tone from within him. It's powerful enough where it could probably find her. He was foolish to forget about the moonstone scepter. Of course, it could find her easily. It was in his desk drawer inside his study. He just needed to get to his study without anybody knowing what he was doing. Yeah, you do that, he told his beta. If you find anything, report back to me as soon as you can. I need to make some phone calls. Maybe Hannah went to see her father. Even as he said those words, he knew that wasn't the case. Hannah hadn't seen her father in weeks. Not since her stepmother and sister were arrested for thievery. Her father has been keeping his distance, and Hannah hasn't had a desire to see him. He wasn't really planning on calling Alpha Steven, though. It was just an excuse he was using to excuse himself. Once he gets the scepter, he was going to track Hannah and find her. He just hoped using the powers of the scepter wouldn't kill him in the process. Sebastian went into his office and sat at his desk. He took in a deep breath. He was nervous about using the scepter purposely. He had never used its powers like this before, and he wasn't sure what to expect. He unlocked his desk drawer and brought the scepter into his hands. The reaction of the scepter was something he didn't expect. As soon as he touched it, the moonstone started to glow. It didn't give him the tingly and burning sensation as it often did when he touched it in the past. It was more obedient to him. It was like the scepter knew exactly what he needed and wanted at that moment. As he looked into the moonstone, his mind was transformed. He was brought to this little room in a brick home. The room looked plain and unused. There was a dresser, a closet, a bedside table, and a bed that was neatly made. Then he saw Hannah standing before Henry, and she looked anything but pleased. She was furious. "Take me home," she demanded. Henry looked surprised. "What? You still want to go home after everything I had just told you? After everything I told you about Sebastian and myself? What the hell has he been telling her?" Hannah's POV. I couldn't listen to him anymore. I didn't want to be around him in this room anymore. My mind felt clouded with all this new information. I couldn't believe that it was Henry that I had saved when I was a little girl. There was something inside of me that was telling me it was all wrong. Nothing he was saying seemed like the truth. Nora made it clear that she didn't trust him, and she was itching to leave. I needed to get out of there. It's almost like I can sense him as our mate, Nora said questionably. I don't feel a strong bond with him, not like I do with Sebastian, but it's still there. Could it be because Sebastian marked us? I asked her in return. Possibly, she answered. It would explain the bond we feel toward him. Once we are marked, any mate bond or pull we feel for another would be gone. So I find it weird that I can almost sense Henry as our mate. I shouldn't be able to sense him at all. That's why I've been finding him so strange. Try to get through to Sebastian again, I told her. I waited a moment before she came through to me again. Still nothing. That shield he has around this house is strong. I wonder where it came from. For a moment, I could almost feel Sebastian near me. It was like he was standing right next to me. It was a wave of comfort, and it was just what I needed at that moment. Take me home, I said firmly to Henry, keeping my eyes locked on his. What? Henry breathed, shocked by my words. You still want to go home after everything I had just told you? After everything I told you about Sebastian and myself? Yes, I told him, proud that my voice sounded confident. I want to go home. I'm not sure what's going to happen later, but I know I can't figure it out while standing here. I need to go home and get my mind straight. Okay, he finally said. But Hannah, I'm not giving up on you that easily. You're my fated mate, and I will continue to fight for you. I'm going to protect you if it's the last thing I do. Sebastian. Fated mate? Eric roared as they returned to their minds. Sebastian shoved the scepter into his desk drawer, and he could feel his heart pounding against his ribcage. He knew where Hannah was located, and he wanted to go here and get her. But he saw that she was already heading home. It didn't sound like she believed much of what he said, which was good. But still. Fated mate. Could Henry really be her mate? Impossible, Eric growled from within him. We marked her. She's our mate. Whatever mate pull there was between them is long gone. There's no way in hell it's possible. He knew his wolf was right. Beta Arnold, he said in a mind link. Bring the men back to the palace. Hannah is on her way. Okay, returning now. He ended the mind link and made his way into the foyer where Raya was clutching at her phone and typing something energetically. I got her, she said with a relieved smile. She will be here soon. Hannah arrived at the palace shortly after. She was alone. Apparently, Henry didn't want to stick around to face Sebastian himself. He scoffed at the thought, probably for the best because Sebastian was ready to tear him apart. But one look at Hannah's beautiful face and his anger melted almost immediately. All the anger and resentment he once felt was turning into relief. She looked unharmed and tired. She met his gaze and tears were drowning in her eyes, threatening to escape. I'm sorry for worrying you, she whispered to him as she ran toward him. He wrapped his arms around her and held her close to him. He never wanted to let her go. Her scent was so comforting, it was filling him with such warmth and love. I thought I felt you there when I was in that room. I could sense you, she whispered, burying her face in his chest. He held her tighter. He wanted to tell her that he was there with her. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. He would have to tell her that he found her using the scepter, and he knew how she felt about the scepter. She found it to be scary and dangerous. She didn't like seeing it or knowing that he was using it. He had to keep that to himself. You're safe now, he whispered to her. I won't let him get you again. She peered up at him, and she could see the worry in her eyes. He said things to me that made no sense. I don't know what to believe anymore. Before he could say anything in response, Raya came running through the foyer. Hannah, she yelled. Hannah managed to pull apart from Sebastian long enough to be embraced by her friend. We've been so worried. Are you hurt? Did he touch you? No, Raya, Hannah breathed, trying to calm her. I'm okay, just tired. I think I need to lay down. Sebastian nodded in agreement and wrapped an arm around her waist. Okay, Raya breathed, watching as they went toward the stairs. We can talk more tomorrow. Good night, Hannah said over her shoulder. Her voice was low and soft. Sebastian could tell a lot was weighing on her mind, but he didn't want to pry. He couldn't tell her that he knew what Henry had said to her because he would be revealing his use of the moonstone scepter. He had to wait until Hannah was ready to talk to him. He had to wait for her to mention it first. We need to make clear to her that Henry is dangerous. Eric growled impatiently. He didn't like this waiting game and wanted to make sure Henry stayed away once and for all. Sebastian didn't respond to his wolf. He helped Hannah to bed. She looked small in his large bed, and he just wanted to hold her, knowing that she was safe in his arms. He wrapped his arms around her as he rested his head on his pillow. Her scent filled the room and gave his body a warm feeling of tranquility. It was enough to silence Eric for the night, and enough to allow him to sleep. Hannah was still asleep when Sebastian woke the next morning. It was early, and he knew her to not be much of a morning person. There was a part of him that wanted to wake her and make sure that she was okay. She looked so upset and distraught when she returned home last night. They hardly even spoke about what happened when she went to Henry's house and how he even got her to go there in the first place. All he knew was that Henry told her that he was their fated mate and said something about revealing information about himself and Sebastian. He wondered what kind of shit Henry was saying to her to make her so upset. He wished he were able to see the entire conversation and figure out exactly what was said to her. But he had to wait until she woke up and felt comfortable enough to talk to him. He kissed the top of her head gently before sliding out of bed. He made his way out of his room and down the stairs. As he reached his living room, he was surprised to see Arnold already awake. He was speaking with some of the servants and a couple of the Gamma warriors. It was like they were having a meeting. "There's an explanation. You can't always believe what you see on the news," Arnold said in a hushed voice. Sebastian rose his brows at his beta. None of them had noticed that he entered the room yet. "But the Alpha," the servant's voice trailed off once he noticed Sebastian standing before him. The color in his face had drained completely, and he started stammering as he staggered backward. This caused everyone to turn and look at Sebastian with worried gazes. "The Alpha what?" Sebastian demanded to know. "Alpha," Arnold said, a little too innocently. "It isn't anything you should worry yourself with." "Everything is something I should worry myself with," Sebastian hissed in return. "This is my kingdom. I am the king. If there is an issue, I need to be aware of it." "Not necessarily an issue," Arnold said. He looked almost nervous. Sebastian took a step closer to them, narrowing his eyes at Arnold. "I won't ask again, Beta Arnold," Sebastian warned. His tone was low and threatening, making the small group visibly tremble. "What is the issue?" Arnold took in a deep breath and pulled out his phone. He opened the news station app and brought up the newest story that was released either last night or that morning. "The kingdom is focused on the picture between Hannah and Henry at the hospital," Arnold explained. "Rumors have speculated and are taking over the media." "Rumors?" Sebastian asked. "About Hannah?" "Yes," Arnold answered. "And about Henry and about you." "What are these rumors saying exactly?" "That Hannah isn't actually your fated mate, that she's only after you for the title and your fortune. They are also saying that she's having an obvious affair with Henry and that he's her fated mate." Hannah's POV. "I felt a sense of emptiness when I woke up the next morning and realized Sebastian was gone. His side of the bed looked so big and empty. It filled me with an inner dread. There was so much I wanted to talk to him about, but I could hardly utter a single word yesterday. I couldn't believe everything I had found out or everything that was told to me. It wasn't making sense, but there was a part of me that believed Henry could possibly be my fated mate. He remembered a part of my childhood that I had never told anyone. Not even Sebastian knew of my heroic efforts as a little girl when I saved that boy. Nora was sensing that Henry was, in fact, my mate, but she was wary of the fact that she can sense it in the first place. She shouldn't be able to sense anything because Sebastian had already marked me. But then something else that Henry mentioned surfaced in my mind, and I grew ill thinking about it. Sebastian was just using me and didn't really love me. "He does love us," Nora insisted. She didn't want to believe anything else other than that. My stomach had an intense pain coursing through, and I grabbed onto it, holding it as the pain lessened. Ouch, I hissed out loud. What the fuck was that? Our baby is in distress, Nora told me, worry in her tone. Just take some deep breaths and relax. It might be a good idea to go get checked out. She was right. I needed to make sure my baby was okay and survive whatever stresses I'm going through. I still hadn't told Sebastian about the pregnancy, and I wouldn't be able to face him or myself if I lost this baby. Hannah, Raya said, knocking frantically on the door. She opened the door before I had the chance to invite her in. Is it true? Is what true? I asked, trying to wrap my mind around everything going on. Are you having an affair with the gardener? She asked, staring around my face like she was searching for answers. I almost wanted to laugh. I definitely wasn't having an affair with Henry. Nora was a bit peeved at the accusation, but I knew there had to be a genuine reason why she was asking. Where is this coming from, Raya? It's all over the news, Hannah, Raya said quickly. I stared at her with disbelief. What? I said again, not sure if I heard her correctly. The news? Somebody took a picture of you and Henry in the hospital, she said. She began to pull out her phone and brought up the photo that's been speculated about all over the media. I gasped again as I grabbed her phone. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was the same photo that Nancy had taken. I thought at the time that she sent it to Sebastian. It seemed plausible considering his reaction. But apparently she didn't send it to him. She sent it to the media. That's how Sebastian saw the picture, because it's all over the internet. I'm going to rip that she-wolf's throat out, Nora roared with fury coursing through her. Someone is going around and saying that you aren't Sebastian's fated mate, Raya said with large and worried eyes. That you are just using him. They said Henry is your real fated mate. My breathing got caught in her throat at her words. How had something like that traveled around the kingdom so quickly? It wasn't making any sense. Henry was with me last night, and this story came out early this morning. There was no way he managed to get to the media this quickly and get a story like this released. Then again, I wasn't sure what he was capable of. She continues scrolling through the article, and then there was another image appeared. It was a photo of me going into Henry's home. The media has been following me, I said in a hollow-sounding tone. Raya glanced at the photo and grimaced as she met my eyes. I'm sure these can easily be explained, she said softly. I swallowed hard and nodded. I'm not having an affair, I said firmly. She flipped to the next screen on her phone and brought up the actual news article. I scanned it briefly. I didn't need to read any more of it. I felt sick to my stomach. They were calling me a no-good Omega she-wolf that was using Sebastian for his title and fortune. They were saying I wasn't his fated mate, and I had no business being his Luna. I have to find Sebastian, I said, standing to my feet. I ran out of the room with Raya following closely behind me. I ran down the stairs and toward Sebastian's office. I knocked on the door, but when I heard no response, I opened it to find his office empty. I turned around to see Arnold approaching us. His eyes looked sad, and he met my gaze. He went into the town to put these rumors to rest, he told me. I sighed in relief. That meant he didn't believe them. He wasn't happy when he saw the news story, or those pictures, Arnold added. There was something indifferent in his tone, and it made me nervous. He did, believe me, didn't he? Nothing was going on between me and Henry. I tried to explain, but he didn't look like he wanted to hear it. The truth will come out eventually, Arnold said, his tone hardening, and when it does, the right people will pay the price. Raya stood beside him, staring up at him with confusion in her eyes. I believe her, she said to him, bringing his attention to her. His gaze softened when he met her eyes. Hannah would never lie to me. If she says nothing is going on, then there's nothing going on. He sighed as if he was defeated, but then he nodded and turned back to me. I apologize, Luna Queen, he said to me, softening his tone. I've worked alongside the Alpha for a long time. He's become a good friend to me, and I care for him. I would hate to see him hurt. I hope you understand my indifference. He's lucky to have someone like you to care for him, I said, trying to sound unbothered and confident, but on the inside I was screaming. I just wanted to see Sebastian so I could tell him for myself that nothing was going on. I had to tell him everything. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Raya and Arnold tensed as well and reached for their phones. There must have been a breaking news story. My heart felt heavy in my chest as I switched on the news app. A live video appeared on my screen. A woman stood at the podium speaking to the media. "It's an outrage that this Omega posed for so long as the Alpha King's mate," she sneered. "She is nothing but a fake and a liar. I knew it from the beginning. That's exactly why I returned, because I am the Alpha King's actual fated mate, and I am claiming my throne." It was Emily, Sebastian's POV. What the fuck did she think she was doing? Sebastian had just enough of Emily and her bullshit. Now she was standing in front of the media and spreading even more lies. Both Sebastian and Emily knew they weren't mates. Maybe at one point, when they were young, Sebastian would have chosen her as a mate, but they never reached that point before she left him. Once she disappeared, he decided she wasn't worth it. Even now that she's returned, he still doesn't want her as a mate. After everything she's done since she returned, lying about her illness, lying to Hannah about her pregnancy, being rude and nasty to Hannah for no reason, and framing Hannah for stealing the scepter, Sebastian had no interest in Emily, and he wanted her gone. He thought he made that perfectly clear to her the last time he went to visit her at the hospital. He had told her to stay away from both him and Hannah, and that he was done with her. But she returned and was making a mess out of something that was already messy. There was no doubt she's had some help in getting those photos and writing those news stories, but he knew she did most of the work and that this had her name written all over it. He felt a wave of fury once he reached the center of the city and shoved his way past the crowd that formed in front of the podium. The media couldn't wait to capture what Emily had to say. Emily gazed around at the crowd, and she had a twinkle in her eyes that Sebastian didn't recognize, but he knew no good was coming from it. "It's an outrage that this Omega posed for so long as the Alpha King's mate. She is nothing but a fake and a liar. I knew it from the beginning. That's exactly why I returned, because I am the Alpha King's actual fated mate, and I am claiming my throne." "What the hell did she just say?" Eric roared. "Nothing she is saying is the truth," Sebastian said to his wolf. "If Hannah sees this, it's going to break her." Even with all the rumors spreading about Hannah and Henry's relationship, Sebastian still couldn't help but worry about what she might think if she hears this new rumor started by Emily. He didn't want Hannah hurt further over this. Hannah's POV. "I felt my entire insides hollowing out. This couldn't be happening. The walls were caving in around me, and I had no other choice but to sit at Sebastian's desk. I felt a wave of dizziness hit me, and for a second, I thought I was going to vomit. I didn't realize I dropped my phone until Raya was picking it up off the ground and placing it on the desk before me. She was staring at me with such concern. I felt numb, but at the same time I could feel my entire body trembling uncontrollably. "Who was that woman?" I heard Raya whispering to Arnold. "Is she actually Alpha King's fated mate?" "It's his ex-girlfriend from years ago," Arnold explained. "I don't know if she's his fated mate, but she hasn't stopped loving him. She made that clear when she returned to town and lied about her illness to keep Sebastian to herself." "What?" Raya gasped, looking over at me. Their voices were distorted, and it almost felt like I was alone in the room. I couldn't even look at them at this point. I kept my eyes locked on the desk and tried my hardest to keep myself together. "Alpha King told me she was lying to keep him away from Hannah, but he never mentioned her being his fated mate," Arnold said, his tone wary. "So she must be lying again," Raya said with finality in her tone. She folded her arms across her chest. "She sounds like a nut." Arnold nodded in agreement and turned to me. "What are you going to do, Luna Queen?" he asked. I was too far gone to answer him, though. I could barely even hear him. I felt my breathing hardening and my chest ached painfully. I was trying so hard to keep myself together, and I felt myself failing miserably. "Hannah?" Raya asked, stepping closer to me. I knew she was worried for me. I just didn't know what to say or what to do. I needed to get out of there. I needed to get some air. I stood from the desk without saying anything and brushed past them. I walked out of the office and felt a warm wave of tears filling my eyes. I knew Raya and Arnold wanted to follow me, but they thought against it and stayed behind, probably to discuss what their next move was. As I made my way through the palace, I realized I didn't know where I was going. I had nowhere else to go at that point. I couldn't hide in the gardens because it would look suspicious. I couldn't face Nancy at the hospital, and besides, my brother was still unconscious, so seeing him right now would be pointless. I didn't even know where Sebastian was. I felt completely alone, and I would be lying if I said I wasn't scared. "Your Majesty?" I heard a voice from nearby. I paused and saw Valerie standing with a couple of other servants by her side. She was staring at me with worried eyes, but she also looked a little frightened. It was a look I had never seen from her before. I only assumed she heard the rumors as well. I shouldn't have been surprised by that. "Is it true?" she asked. Her voice kept soft. "You aren't Alpha King's fated mate?" I wasn't sure what to say in response, but I knew I couldn't lie to her about it. I was a terrible liar, and it would only make me look more guilty if the truth came out. "Yes," I told them, straightening my stance and trying to look more in control. But this only made them tense, and their worried gazes shifted onto one another. "I'm not his fated mate," I confirmed using more words. "And you're an Omega?" another servant asked. I was hesitant with answering, but I nodded once. "That is correct," I told them. "But that doesn't reflect who I am, whom you know me as." "But you lied," Valerie breathed. "Did Caroline know?" I don't think I ever brought it up to Caroline either. I didn't want to be judged based on my werewolf ranking. I wanted them to like and respect me on my own terms. I didn't think I would have to explain myself like this. I didn't respond. I needed to get some air. My stomach was starting to ache again as my baby fluttered in distress. I should have gone straight to the hospital to get looked at. I had to tell Sebastian everything I had learned, including this pregnancy. It couldn't wait anymore. "Do you have any idea how disrespectful that is to the moon goddess?" Valerie shouted after me, causing me to pause. "The Alpha King is supposed to be married to his fated mate, and you took that from him." "You are mistaken," I said calmly. "He was the one who requested to marry me. Under false pretexted, I'm sure. He would never marry a simple Omega who wasn't even his mate." "I didn't do anything that Sebastian wasn't aware of," I informed them, staring amongst the servants. "I didn't lie to anybody." They didn't look convinced. Valerie stepped closer to me so she could speak to me without the others listening. "Word of advice, Your Majesty," she whispered. "You shouldn't stay here. You need to leave this palace and never look back." Hannah's POV. I was stunned by what Valerie had just said. She took a step back to join the other servants so they could speak amongst themselves. I stood frozen and stared at them with such disbelief crossing my face. But then there was a part of me that almost believed what she said to be true. It was Amy who was supposed to marry Sebastian in the first place. I was just his replacement bride because she didn't want to marry him. Maybe if he knew the truth, he wouldn't love me anymore. There was so much crap happening with all these rumors. It was a waste of Sebastian's time. I felt a heavy knot in the pit of my stomach. I was causing him so much stress and unhappiness. Maybe leaving was the best thing I could do for him. Maybe Henry was telling me the truth and he really was my fated mate. I could find a way to be happy with Henry and leave Sebastian alone. "You're speaking nonsense," Nora scolded. "Sebastian loves us regardless of what happens. You have to believe that." I wanted to believe that, but I was having trouble keeping my faith. Another shot of pain went through my body, and I nearly tumbled over. Thankfully, the servants didn't seem to notice my pained expression, or they didn't care to notice. I didn't say another word to them. I brushed past them and left out of the front door of the palace. It felt good to have fresh air. The brisk breeze kissed my skin and sent a shiver throughout my body. I took in a steady breath to calm myself. I still felt an ache in my stomach, but it wasn't as intense as it was moments ago. I decided to mind-link Sebastian. "Where are you?" "Press conference," he answered. "I shouldn't be long. I just needed to shut this shit down." I didn't say anything in response. I allowed myself to get lost in my thoughts. "What's wrong?" he finally asked. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I told him, but even I didn't believe my lies. "Do you ever think that maybe it would be easier if I just left?" "What?" he asked. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean, I cause you a lot of stress." "Hannah, you are my Luna. You aren't going anywhere," he said harshly. It didn't sound like it was up for discussion. Where is this even coming from? It doesn't really matter, I muttered in return. If it's about Emily, I'm dealing with it. I know. I'll be home soon and then we can talk more, he told me. Okay? Yeah, I responded. I'll see you soon. The mind link ended and I didn't feel much better. It was nice hearing his voice, but I wished that he was here with me. I needed to feel his presence and see him for myself. I wanted to grab his mask and rip it off his face once and for all. I just needed to look at him and kiss him and be with him as a Luna should be with her husband. I felt a flutter in my stomach, and I grew worried as a small shot of pain went through my spine. Ouch, I muttered. We should go to the hospital, Nora told me again. She was right. I couldn't waste any more time. Before I could start in the direction of the hospital, my phone rang in my pocket. I paused and glanced down at the caller ID, feeling a heaviness in my chest. As soon as I saw Dr. Davis's name appear on the screen, I almost forgot how to breathe. Oh no, what now? I asked myself. I knew it had to be because of Liam again. Something was always wrong. Hello? I asked into the phone, hearing the nervousness in my own tone. You need to come to the hospital, Dr. Davis said urgently. Your brother stopped breathing. I hung up the phone instantly, and I didn't waste any more time. Thankfully, Lewis was standing by the car. It looked like he was eating lunch when I approached him. Once he noticed me, he straightened his stance and tried to hide the fact that he was eating a sandwich. He gave me a broad smile and bowed his head. Good morning, Your Majesty, he said to me as I ran to the car. Where are we going? The hospital, I said. I told him. He nodded and opened the door for me to enter. As I slid into the car, I tried to mind link Sebastian again, but this time I couldn't get through. It was like something was blocking me from him. I knew he was probably on his way back from the press conference by now, and it didn't make sense that he wasn't answering me. I would have to try again once I was at the hospital. Instead, I mind-linked Raya and told her to meet me at the hospital. He's not breathing on his own, Dr. Davis said as I rushed into the hospital. He's currently on life support. It doesn't make any sense. He was fine, and then he wasn't. I let out a sob as I held my mouth with my hands. Tears spread across my features. My entire body shook as I cried into my hands. Dr. Davis pushed open the door to the room, and I saw Liam lying in bed with even more tubes coming out of him. He looked even worse than when I last saw him, if that was even possible. His body was frigid, regardless of how many blankets he had on him. The thing is, I think somebody was here, Dr. Davis said from the door. I snapped a glare at him, anger fueling me. What do you mean by someone was in here? I asked firmly. I saw a hooded figure leaving his room. It was like a shadow almost. I didn't see their face, but it was gone by the time I got here. I went to check on Liam and he was coding. He wasn't breathing. More fury was rising through me. My first thought was Nancy. It had to be Nancy. She was messing with the wrong person, and I wasn't going to stand for this. Find out who that person was, I ordered him. If it was someone in this hospital, they are to report to me, the Luna Queen. It wasn't like me to use my title against anyone, but this was my brother we were talking about. I wasn't playing any games when it came to my brother. Dr. Davis nodded and left the room. I turned back to my brother and continued to sob over his unconscious body. I couldn't believe this was happening. I never even got a chance to say goodbye to him. I couldn't let him die. Not like his. Another heavy shot of pain went through my entire body, and this time I did fall to the ground. I felt sweat pouring on my forehead and my breathing grow harsh. It felt like my body was about to explode. It's the baby, Nora cried. Something is wrong, and I can't get a hold of Sebastian's wolf. I heard the door of the room swing open, and I felt Raya's presence instantly. Hannah! She yelled, rushing toward me. What happened? Are you okay? I opened my mouth to speak, but it hurt too badly to utter any words. She started screaming for help, and I could feel myself about to pass out completely. I grabbed a hold of her arm to focus her attention on me. My baby was all I managed to whisper before darkness consumed me and my body went limp. Sebastian. A pain shot through his body as he reached his car. Everything started screaming at him, and he had to grab onto his door to keep from tumbling over. His head was pounding to a point where he thought he was going to vomit. He managed to pull himself into his car and slam the door shut. He began deep breathing, trying to steady his racing heart and soothe some of the pain in his head. He closed his eyes, feeling even more nauseous than before. Beads of sweat started forming on his forehead, dripping down his features and the nape of his neck. His body trembled uncontrollably as he tried to get a handle on the pain. For a moment, it was almost like the scars under his mask were burning and tearing away at his face. It took everything he had not to rip his mask off for just an ounce of relief. "What the fuck is happening?" Sebastian growled to his wolf. Eric didn't answer. "Eric, what the hell?" Sebastian growled again through his gritted teeth as another wave of pain coursed through him. Eric still didn't answer. Sebastian realized he couldn't even feel Eric's presence within him. It was like he had somehow gone into hibernation without a single warning. Something was wrong. Just when he thought he couldn't handle it anymore, the pain started to ease. He was soon able to drive himself home. He didn't bother having Lewis drive him because he was in such a hurry this morning. As soon as he saw what Emily was doing at the press conference, he knew he had to put an end to it. She was never his mate, and she would never be his mate. He told the media to shut down the press conference and ordered Emily to return home. She didn't look like she was going to leave through, and was persistent that they were mates. Before he could argue with her more about it, Hannah mind-linked him and she sounded distressed. She said something about leaving because of all the trouble she causes. Sebastian wasn't going to let that happen. As he reached the palace, he was surprised when he didn't sense Hannah nearby. It sounded like she wanted to be around him earlier, and he thought she would be there waiting for him. That's the reason why he left the press conference a little earlier than planned. He's been so wrapped up with work lately that he's been neglecting her. It wasn't fair to her. Sebastian tried to mind-link her, but it wasn't going through. Probably had something to do with wherever his wolf went. "Alpha," Arnold said as soon as Sebastian walked into the palace. "Where's Hannah?" Sebastian asked, looking around to try to get a sense of her whereabouts. "She's at the hospital," he told him. His voice sounded off, and Sebastian noticed he wasn't looking at him in the eyes. His gaze was fixated on the ground. "Why? Is it Liam?" Sebastian asked, narrowing his eyes at his beta. "You should get to the hospital." That was all Arnold managed to say. "Hannah, I woke up with Raya sitting at my bedside. She was teary-eyed and she looked so frightened, but a flood of relief went through her face as she noticed me awake." "You're awake," she breathed through her tear-filled eyes. "I thought," her voice trailed off as a sob escaped through her lips. I lifted my head and glanced around the room I was in. I was in my own hospital room. "Where's Liam?" I asked. My voice came out as a croak, and I winced as a shot of pain went through my body. "Try not to move too much," she said, motioning for me to stay still. I lay my head back on my pillow, but all I wanted to do was jump out of bed and go see my brother. Part of me was hoping it was just a bad dream and that Liam was actually okay. I needed him to be okay. "There's no change," she whispered, meeting my eyes. "He's still on life support. They aren't sure why he's not breathing on his own. His heart will sometimes fail too, and they keep having to revive him." I sighed and turned my head away from her so she wouldn't see the stray tears falling from my eyes. My heart was heavy in my chest. I knew there was nothing that was going to be able to save my brother. It was too late. He was dying, and I couldn't do anything about it. The door opened slightly, and Dr. Davis popped his head in. Once he saw I was awake, he gave me a small and yet sad smile as he made his way into the room. "You gave us a scare," Dr. Davis said, strolling over to my bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like shit," I muttered, glancing up at him. "Do we know who was in Liam's room?" I asked. It hurt to talk. My voice was so raspy that I didn't even recognize it. He shook his head. I looked at the cameras, but when I did, his voice trailed off. He appeared to be deep in thought. "What?" I urged. He met my eyes before he continued. "There was nobody there," he told me. "I swear I saw somebody, but he wasn't in the footage, and nobody else saw him, so maybe it was just a shadow." I wanted to believe that it was a shadow and that nobody was in Liam's room, but I didn't. I wasn't the one who saw it, but something was telling me that it was there. "I guess it was just my imagination," Dr. Davis said. but he didn't sound sure of himself. I continued to stare up at him with a questioning gaze, but I didn't say anything. We both knew it wasn't just his imagination, but there was no other explanation as to what the shadow person was. "What about my baby?" I asked, pressing my hands against my stomach. My stomach started to form a different shape, not big enough to be noticeable, but big enough for me to notice and know that a baby is growing inside. There was a lot of distress. "Your baby has moved into a different region in your body, and it is dangerously close to getting the umbilical cord wrapped around its neck," he explained. My heart fell into my stomach. He sounded so worried, and I wasn't liking the look he was giving me. "So to fix that, we would have to open you up." "Surgery?" I asked. He nodded. "It's the only way to save the baby at this point. It's too little to be born right now and wouldn't survive otherwise." I don't. "Does she have to decide what to do right now?" Raya asked, grabbing onto my hand and squeezing it gently. "Can she have time to process everything?" "I'm afraid there isn't much more time. If we wait too long, the baby will suffocate," Dr. Davis explained, keeping his eyes locked on mine. "Okay," I breathed, pulling my eyes away from him and looking at Raya. "I'll have the surgery. I need to save this baby." "Of course," Raya said, wrapping her arms around me to give me a gentle hug. "Raya, Sebastian doesn't know that I'm pregnant." "Do you want me to call him?" she asked, releasing me. I nodded and wiped some stray tears from my eyes with the back of my hand. "Yes," I answered. "I've been trying to mind link him all morning, but it's not going through. I think something's wrong." "Okay, I'll give him a call," she said as she stood from my bed and walked toward the hallway. "I'll get the OR ready. We can wait for Sebastian to arrive before we do anything," Dr. Davis said, giving me a small, reassuring smile before he left the room. It didn't take long for Sebastian to arrive. I didn't sense him when he got into the hospital, which I found to be odd. Nora was saying she couldn't sense his wolf, and she was worried about that. Raya told me that Sebastian was already on his way to the hospital when she called. Apparently, Arnold told him that he needed to come here right away, and he rushed over. He barged into the hospital room, and I felt a flood of relief coming over me as soon as I saw him standing before me. He was breathing heavily and was struggling to catch his breath. But then I saw a flash of hurt in his eyes as he stared at me. "When were you going to tell me you're pregnant?"